Biker breaks old man's walking stick, then realizes who he is. In the small town of Millfield, fear was a constant companion. The streets were ruled by a notorious biker gang, led by the arrogant and intimidating Logan Drake. The gang thrived on the fear they instilled in the hearts of the townspeople, believing that no one would ever dare to challenge their authority. They roamed the streets with impunity, mocking the weak and vulnerable, and acting without consequence. But little did Logan know that one fateful encounter would change everything. Albert "Al" Thompson, an elderly man, slowly made his way down the sidewalk, his steps steady but labored. He relied on his worn wooden cane for support, a faithful companion that had seen him through countless challenges. Al was a well-liked figure in Millfield, known for his gentle demeanor and kind heart. He kept to himself, never bothering anyone, content with the simple life he had built. As Al turned the corner, he found himself face to face with Logan and his gang. The bikers, always on the lookout for easy targets, spotted the elderly man and decided to amuse themselves at his expense. With a cruel grin, one of the gang members kicked Al's walking stick out from under him, sending him stumbling forward. Logan, seizing the opportunity to assert his dominance, stepped forward and grabbed the cane from Al's grasp. With a wicked laugh, he snapped the wooden stick in half, tossing the pieces aside like worthless trash. Al steadied himself, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock and disappointment. What Logan failed to realize was that Al was no ordinary old man. Behind the facade of age and frailty lay a hidden truth. Al was a retired war hero and a legendary hand-to-hand combat instructor. He had once trained elite soldiers, shaping them into the toughest warriors in the country. And among those warriors was someone who would soon make Logan regret his actions. As Al walked away, his broken cane discarded on the ground, a spark of determination ignited within him. He knew that change was coming, and he was ready to play his part in the unfolding story. News of the incident with Al spread like wildfire through the small town of Millfield. Whispers of Logan's cruelty and the gang's relentless intimidation tactics reached every corner, fueling the already simmering resentment among the townspeople. But amidst the fear and despair, a glimmer of hope emerged. Al's former students, a group of highly skilled and respected veterans, caught wind of what had transpired. These men and women had been trained by Al during their military days, and they held a deep respect and admiration for their mentor. The news of his mistreatment at the hands of Logan and his gang struck a chord within them, igniting a fire that wouldn't be easily extinguished. The veterans, scattered across the country, began to converge on Millfield. They came from all walks of life. Some were now successful businessmen, others had become teachers or community leaders. But they all shared a common bond, the teachings and values instilled in them by Al. As they arrived in town, the veterans quietly observed the situation, taking note of the gang's tactics and the fear that gripped the community. They knew that resorting to violence would only perpetuate the cycle of intimidation. Instead, they devised a plan to turn the tables on Logan and his gang, using their discipline, strategy, and unity to outmaneuver the bikers at every turn. The veterans began to infiltrate every aspect of Millfield's daily life. They volunteered at community centers, helped local businesses, and provided support to those in need. Their presence brought a sense of security and hope to the townspeople, who had long felt powerless in the face of the gang's oppression. Logan, oblivious to the gathering storm, continued his reign of terror, unaware that the very foundation of his power was about to be shaken. The veterans worked tirelessly behind the scenes, building alliances, gathering intelligence, and preparing for the moment when they would strike. As the sun set on Millfield, the stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of the town. The veterans, united in their purpose, were ready to show Logan that true strength lay not in fear, but in the unbreakable bonds of community and resilience. As the veterans quietly went about their work, the town of Millfield began to undergo a subtle but profound transformation. The once deserted streets slowly came to life as people emerged from their homes, drawn by the newfound sense of security and unity that the veterans brought with them. Rachel Thompson, Al's granddaughter and a young school teacher, watched with a mix of pride and apprehension as the town started to stand up against Logan and his gang. She had always admired her grandfather's quiet strength and the way he carried himself with dignity, even in the face of adversity. Seeing the veterans rally around him filled her heart with hope. but she couldn't shake the feeling that the confrontation with Logan was far from over. Meanwhile, Logan remained oblivious to the shifting tides. He continued to strut through the streets, his arrogance blinding him to the growing resistance. His gang, too, remained loyal, convinced that their reign of terror would never be challenged. But the veterans were not content to simply wait for Logan to make his move. They began to execute their plan, using their skills and resources to chip away at the gang's power base. They infiltrated the gang's inner circle, gathering intelligence and sowing seeds of doubt among the members. They disrupted the gang's illegal activities, cutting off their sources of income and influence. As the gang's grip on the town weakened, the townspeople grew bolder. They started to speak out against Logan and his cronies, refusing to be intimidated any longer. Small acts of defiance rippled through the community, from shopkeepers refusing to pay protection money to residents organizing neighborhood watch groups. Logan, finally sensing the change in the air, grew increasingly paranoid. He lashed out at anyone who dared to question his authority, but his outbursts only served to further alienate him from the town. The veterans, sensing that the time was ripe, prepared for the final confrontation. They knew that the battle for Millfield's soul would not be won through violence, but through the power of unity and the strength of the human spirit. As tensions in Millfield reached a boiling point, Logan found himself increasingly isolated and desperate. His once loyal gang members began to question his leadership, whispering among themselves about the changes taking place in the town. In a last-ditch effort to reassert his dominance, Logan decided to confront Al directly. He stormed into the town square, where Al was quietly reading a book on a bench, surrounded by a group of children who had gathered to listen to his stories. Logan approached Al with a sneer, his hand resting on the handle of his knife. "You think you're some kind of hero, old man?" he snarled. "You and your little band of veterans think you can take me down?" Al looked up at Logan with a calm, steady gaze. "I don't think anyone needs to take you down, Logan," he said softly. "You're doing a pretty good job of that yourself." Logan's face twisted in rage, and he lunged at Al, his knife glinting in the sunlight. But before he could strike, a hand caught his wrist in an iron grip. Logan turned to see one of the veterans, a tall, muscular man with a steely glint in his eye. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the veteran said, his voice low and menacing. Logan looked around, suddenly realizing that he was surrounded by a group of veterans, all of whom were staring at him with cold, unblinking eyes. He felt a trickle of fear run down his spine, and for the first time in his life, he knew what it was like to be on the receiving end of true power. Al stood up slowly, leaning on his new cane, a gift from the veterans. "It's over, Logan," he said quietly. "The town has seen who you really are, and they've chosen to stand together against you." Logan looked around, seeing the faces of the townspeople who had once cowered in fear before him. But now, those faces were filled with determination and strength, united in their resolve to take back their town. In that moment, Logan realized that he had lost. And for the first time in his life, he felt the weight of his own actions crushing down on him. In the aftermath of the confrontation in the town square, Logan found himself at a crossroads. The realization that he had lost the fear and respect of the townspeople hit him like a ton of bricks. He retreated to his hideout on the outskirts of town, his mind reeling with the events of the past few weeks. As he sat in the dimly lit room, surrounded by the remnants of his once powerful gang, Logan couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness. The thrill of intimidation and control that had once fueled him now felt hollow and meaningless. In the days that followed, Logan watched as the town of Millfield began to thrive. The veterans, with the support of the community, started various initiatives to rebuild and strengthen the town. They organized neighborhood cleanup projects, launched after-school programs for the youth, and worked with local businesses to create new job opportunities. The transformation was remarkable. The once deserted streets were now filled with laughter and a sense of camaraderie. People greeted each other with warm smiles, and the fear that had once gripped the town was replaced by a newfound sense of pride and unity. Logan couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy as he observed the town's progress from afar. He had always believed that power came from fear and intimidation, but now he was starting to see the true strength that lay in community and respect. Meanwhile, Al had become a beacon of hope for the town. His wisdom and resilience had inspired people of all ages, and his story of standing up against Logan and his gang had become a legend. Children looked up to him as a role model, and adults sought his advice on how to build a better future for Millfield. As Logan grappled with his own inner turmoil, he knew that he had a choice to make. He could either continue down the path of violence and cruelty, or he could learn from Al's example and find a new purpose in life. Deep down, Logan yearned for the sense of belonging and respect that he saw in the town. But the road to redemption would not be an easy one, and he knew that he had a long way to go to earn back the trust of the people he had once terrorized. As the days turned into weeks, Logan found himself increasingly drawn to the positive changes taking place in Millfield. Despite his initial reluctance, he couldn't help but notice the way the town had come alive with a renewed sense of purpose and unity. One afternoon, as he was walking through the town square, Logan spotted Al sitting on a bench, surrounded by a group of children. The elderly man was telling them a story, his eyes twinkling with warmth and humor. Logan paused, observing the scene from a distance. As he listened to Al's tale, Logan was struck by the way the children hung on every word. They laughed and gasped at all the right moments, their faces filled with wonder and excitement. It was a far cry from the fear and intimidation that Logan had once relied on to control people. In that moment, something stirred within Logan. He realized that he wanted to be a part of this community, to feel the same sense of belonging and purpose that he saw in the faces of those around him. Hesitantly, Logan approached Al and the children. The elderly man looked up, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. But instead of turning him away, Al simply smiled and gestured for Logan to join them. Logan sat down on the bench, feeling awkward and unsure of himself. But as he listened to Al's story and watched the children's reactions, he began to relax. For the first time in his life, he felt a sense of connection and warmth that he had never experienced before. As the story came to an end, Al turned to Logan and spoke softly. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Logan," he said. "It's never too late to start over and make things right." Those words struck a chord within Logan, and he felt a lump form in his throat. He knew that he had a long way to go to make amends for his past actions, but with Al's encouragement and the support of the community, he felt a glimmer of hope for the future. From that day forward, Logan began to take small steps towards change. He started by volunteering at the local community center, helping with various projects and events. It wasn't easy, and he faced plenty of skepticism and distrust from those who remembered his past. But slowly, through his actions and dedication, Logan began to earn the respect and forgiveness of the townspeople. As Logan continued his journey of redemption, he found himself spending more and more time with Al and the veterans. He was drawn to their strength, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to the community. One day, as Logan was helping Al repair a fence at the local park, he finally found the courage to ask the question that had been weighing on his mind. "Why did you give me a second chance?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "After everything I did, why did you welcome me into your community?" Al paused, setting down his hammer and turning to face Logan. His eyes were filled with compassion and understanding. "Because I believe in the power of forgiveness," he said softly. "I've seen firsthand the destruction that hatred and violence can cause, and I know that the only way to break that cycle is through love and understanding." Logan nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. He had never known such kindness and acceptance in his life, and it was overwhelming. Al placed a hand on Logan's shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. "You have the potential to do great things, Logan," he said. "You just needed someone to believe in you and give you a chance to prove it." Those words stayed with Logan, echoing in his mind as he continued to work alongside the veterans and the community. He began to see himself in a new light, not as a ruthless biker, but as a man with the power to make a difference. As the weeks passed, Logan's efforts began to bear fruit. He helped organize a community garden, teaching the children how to plant and tend to the vegetables. He worked with the veterans to start a mentorship program for at-risk youth, sharing his own story of redemption and encouraging them to choose a different path. Slowly but surely, the town of Millfield began to heal. The scars of the past would never fully fade, but with each passing day, the community grew stronger and more united. And at the center of it all was Logan, a man who had once been feared and despised, but who now stood as a symbol of hope and transformation. As the months passed, Logan's transformation became the talk of the town. People who had once crossed the street to avoid him now greeted him with warm smiles and words of encouragement. Children who had once cowered in fear now looked up to him as a role model and friend. But not everyone was convinced of Logan's change of heart. Some members of his former gang, still bitter and resentful, began to plot against him. They saw his newfound commitment to the community as a betrayal, and they were determined to make him pay. Late one night, as Logan was walking home from a community meeting, he found himself surrounded by a group of his former associates. They taunted him, calling him a traitor and a coward, and demanding that he return to his old ways. Logan stood his ground, his eyes blazing with determination. "I'm not going back," he said firmly. "I found something better, something worth fighting for." The gang members laughed, their faces twisted with cruelty. They lunged at Logan, ready to teach him a lesson he would never forget. But Logan was no longer the same man he had once been. With the skills and strength he had gained from working alongside the veterans, he fought back, his movements swift and precise. He dodged their blows and countered with his own, sending them stumbling backwards in surprise. As the fight continued, Logan's former gang members began to realize that they were outmatched. They had underestimated the power of a man who had found a new purpose and a community to stand behind him. In the end, Logan emerged victorious, his attackers fleeing into the night. But he knew that the battle was far from over. The gang would not give up easily, and he would need to be vigilant and strong to protect the town he had come to love. As he limped home, bruised and battered but unbroken, Logan knew that he had made the right choice. He had found a new family in Millfield, a family that would stand with him through thick and thin. And with their support and love, he knew that he could face whatever challenges lay ahead, and emerge stronger and more determined than ever before. News of the attack on Logan spread quickly through Millfield, sparking a wave of outrage and concern among the townspeople. They rallied around him, offering their support and protection, determined to show the gang that they would not be intimidated. Al and the veterans took charge, organizing patrols and neighborhood watch groups to keep an eye out for any signs of trouble. They worked with the local police to increase their presence in the town, sending a clear message that violence and intimidation would not be tolerated. Logan, for his part, refused to be cowed by the attack. Here is the continuation of the story. He threw himself into his work with the community, determined to show that he would not be deterred from his path of redemption. He spent long hours at the community center, working with the children and helping to organize events and projects that brought the town together. As the days turned into weeks, the gang's presence in Millfield began to fade. Without Logan's leadership and the community's newfound unity, they found themselves increasingly isolated and powerless. But even as the immediate threat receded, Logan knew that the work of building a stronger, more resilient community was far from over. He met with Al and the veterans, discussing ways to address the root causes of the town's problems: poverty, lack of opportunity, and a sense of hopelessness that had allowed the gang to thrive for so long. Together, they began to develop a long-term plan for Millfield's future. They reached out to local businesses and organizations, seeking partnerships and resources to create new programs and initiatives that would benefit the entire community. As the plan took shape, Logan felt a sense of pride and purpose that he had never known before. He had once believed that power came from fear and violence, but now he understood that true strength came from unity, compassion, and a shared vision for a better future. And as he looked around at the faces of his fellow townspeople, the children playing in the park, the small business owners working to rebuild their livelihoods, the veterans standing tall and proud, he knew that he had found his true calling. He was no longer Logan Drake, the feared leader of a biker gang. He was Logan Drake, a member of the Millfield community, a man who had found the courage to change and the strength to lead by example. And with that knowledge, he knew that he could face whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the love and support of the people who had become his family. As Millfield continued to thrive under the guidance of Logan, Alabama, and the veterans, word of their success began to spread beyond the town's borders. Other communities facing similar challenges reached out to them, seeking advice and inspiration. Logan found himself traveling to neighboring towns and cities, sharing his story and the lessons he had learned. He spoke of the power of second chances, the importance of community, and the transformative impact of small acts of kindness. At first, he was nervous about speaking in front of crowds, unsure of how his message would be received. But as he saw the faces of those who listened to him, the hope and determination in their eyes, he began to understand the true power of his words. Back in Millfield, the community continued to grow and evolve. New businesses opened, bringing jobs and economic opportunities to the town. The community center expanded its programs, offering classes and workshops on everything from art and music to computer skills and financial literacy. And at the heart of it all was the garden, the symbol of Millfield's transformation. What had once been a vacant lot overgrown with weeds was now a lush and thriving oasis, filled with flowers, vegetables, and fruit trees. Logan often found himself walking through the garden, marveling at the beauty and abundance that surrounded him. He would stop to chat with the children who played there, teaching them about the plants and the importance of nurturing growth. In those moments, he felt a deep sense of contentment and purpose. He had once been a man consumed by anger and violence, but now he was a source of hope and inspiration for others. As he looked out over the garden, he knew that the seeds of change he had helped to plant would continue to grow and flourish long after he was gone. And with that knowledge, he could face the future with courage and optimism, knowing that he had made a difference in the world. Millfield had become more than just a town, it was a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of community and the resilience of the human spirit. Years passed, and Millfield continued to prosper under the leadership of Logan, Alabama, and the veterans. The town had become a model of what was possible when people came together in the spirit of unity and compassion. But even as Logan celebrated the community's success, he knew that there was still work to be done. There were always new challenges to face, new problems to solve, and he was determined to meet them head-on. One day, as he was walking through the town square, he noticed a group of teenagers huddled together, whispering and casting furtive glances around them. Logan recognized the signs of trouble brewing, and he knew that he had to act fast. He approached the group, his voice calm but firm. "Is everything okay?" he asked, looking each of them in the eye. At first, they were reluctant to talk to him, but as he listened to their stories, tales of broken homes, absent parents, and a sense of hopelessness, he began to understand the root of their discontent. Logan knew that he couldn't solve their problems overnight, but he also knew that he couldn't turn his back on them. He invited them to the community center, offering them a safe space to talk and a chance to get involved in the programs and activities that had helped so many others. At first, the teenagers were hesitant, but as they began to participate in the center's workshops and events, they started to see the value in being part of something larger than themselves. They found mentors and role models in Logan and the other adults who volunteered their time and expertise. As Logan watched them grow and change, he felt a sense of pride and responsibility. He knew that he had once been like them, angry, lost, and looking for a place to belong. But he also knew that with the right support and guidance, they could become leaders and changemakers in their own right. And so, he continued to work with them, nurturing their talents and their dreams, and showing them that they had the power to create their own destinies. In doing so, he knew that he was helping to build a brighter future for Millfield and beyond. As the years went by, Logan began to realize that his work in Millfield was not just about repairing the damage of the past, but about building a foundation for the future. He knew that the true test of the community's strength would come not in times of crisis, but in the everyday moments that defined its character. He started to focus on the little things, the small acts of kindness and compassion that made Millfield a special place to live. He encouraged his neighbors to look out for one another, to lend a helping hand when someone was in need, and to celebrate the unique gifts and talents that each person brought to the community. Under his guidance, the town began to host regular events and festivals, bringing people together to share food, music, and laughter. There were movie nights in the park, potluck dinners at the community center, and impromptu gatherings on front porches and street corners. As Logan watched the town come alive with a new sense of joy and connection, he knew that he had helped to create something truly special. Millfield was no longer just a place to live, it was a family, a community of people who looked out for one another and lifted each other up. But even as he celebrated the town's successes, Logan never lost sight of the challenges that lay ahead. He knew that there would always be those who sought to divide and conquer, who saw weakness in unity and strength in fear. And so, he continued to be vigilant, working with Al and the veterans to keep the community safe and strong. They trained a new generation of leaders, passing on the skills and wisdom they had gained over the years. As Logan looked out over the town he loved, he knew that he had found his true calling in life. He had once been a man without a purpose, consumed by anger and violence. But now, he was a leader, a mentor, and a friend to all who knew him. And with that knowledge, he could face whatever the future held with courage and conviction, knowing that he had helped to build a legacy of hope and resilience that would endure long after he was gone. As Logan entered his twilight years, he often found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. He had come so far from the angry, bitter man he had once been, and he knew that he owed much of his transformation to the people of Millfield. He thought of Al, the wise and gentle soul who had shown him the power of forgiveness and compassion. He thought of the veterans, the brave men and women who had stood by his side and helped him to become a better man. And he thought of the children, the bright and shining stars who represented the future of the town. As he walked through the streets of Millfield, he was struck by how much the town had changed over the years. The once boarded-up storefronts were now thriving businesses, the vacant lots transformed into parks and gardens. But more than that, he saw the change in the people themselves, the smiles on their faces, the warmth in their eyes, the sense of pride and belonging that radiated from every corner of the community. Logan knew that his time was growing short, but he also knew that his work was not yet done. He had one last project to complete, one final gift to give to the town that had given him so much. And so, on a warm summer day, he gathered the people of Millfield together in the town square. With Al and the veterans by his side, he unveiled a statue, a monument to the power of second chances, the importance of community, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. As he looked out over the sea of faces, Logan felt a sense of peace and fulfillment wash over him. He had lived a life of purpose and meaning, and he knew that his legacy would live on long after he was gone. With tears in his eyes, he turned to Al and the veterans, the people who had become his family. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me, for showing me the way. I could never have done this without you." And as the sun began to set over Millfield, Logan knew that he was ready for whatever lay ahead. He had found his home, his purpose, and his redemption, and that was enough. As the years passed and the world continued to change, the story of Millfield and its remarkable transformation became the stuff of legend. People came from far and wide to see the town that had been reborn, to walk its streets and meet its people, and to learn from its example. And at the heart of that legend was Logan Drake, the man who had once been feared and reviled, but who had found the courage to change and the strength to lead. His statue stood tall in the town square, a symbol of hope and inspiration for generations to come. But even as Millfield basked in the glow of its success, the people never forgot the lessons they had learned. They knew that the true power of their community lay not in its buildings or its monuments, but in the hearts and minds of its people. They continued to look out for one another, to lend a helping hand when someone was in need, and to celebrate the unique gifts and talents that each person brought to the table. They knew that the work of building a strong and resilient community was never truly finished, but was an ongoing process that required commitment, compassion, and grace. As for Logan, he spent his final years surrounded by the love and gratitude of the people he had helped to inspire. He knew that he had made mistakes in his life, but he also knew that he had been given a second chance, and he had made the most of it. In his last moments, as he lay in his bed surrounded by his family and friends, Logan looked out the window at the town he loved. He saw the children playing in the park, the small business owners working to build their dreams, the veterans standing tall and proud. And he knew that he had lived a life worth living, a life that had made a difference in the world, that had brought hope and healing to those who needed it most. With a final smile, Logan closed his eyes and drifted off into a peaceful sleep. And as his last breath left his body, the people of Millfield knew that his spirit would live on forever, a shining beacon of hope and redemption in a world that desperately needed both.